going on, everybody? It's Stan Grubb live tonight, 1 a.m. Monday morning. A very special impromptu edition of Corner to Corner Radio. I don't often do this, and the guys are not with me this evening. The Triple Threat is not here with me this evening. Nope, nothing's going on. Don't worry. I promise you, everything is good. Tonight, I finally had an opportunity to watch one of the finest documentaries I have ever witnessed in my life. Probably because it's a wrestling-related documentary. You know, in professional wrestling, you have these larger-than-life men and women, characters, heroes and villains, and they bring you to a point in your life where the world that you experience on your own, whether it's your family or your friends or enemies, torments, triumphs, trials, it puts you in a position where you're given an escape. Professional wrestling has a long time been that for me. Individually, personally. Not that I was a broken home or anything like that in my life. I had a pretty good upbringing, I think. My mom and dad were good people. Are good people. Divorced when I was young. I mean, this is not really about that. But the point is, the issues that I dealt with in my sad little life, I guess you could call it, they weren't such issues when wrestling was on. I discovered professional wrestling at 8 years old. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Probably 7. 7 years old, living in Alexandria, Virginia, with my father and stepmother and brothers and sister. And one of the very first memories I have of professional wrestling is of Andre the Giant on Saturday night's main event and Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, for many people, Jake the Snake Roberts lives. His legend is overwhelming. It is one of those things that you will never truly get into unless you experience it in a live event type setting, or you could even say seeing it as it happens live. Whether it's live event or pay-per-view or God, you name it. Anyway, Saturday night's main event, Andre the Giant is in the ring doing what he does best, threatening and intimidating and doing just what some could call the Lord's work as far as standing the role of the immovable force. And out comes a guy named Jake the Snake Roberts, who by no means of the imagination was Jake Roberts a muscular man or he wasn't a muscular man, he wasn't a overwhelming presence just to look at him. But what he was fearless. He didn't care if he was up against a guy named Andre the Giant, or again the ring with Bad News Brown, or Special Delivery Jones, or Pez Whatley. It didn't matter. He was afraid of nothing. And what I remember from that very first memory of wrestling was Jake Roberts pulling out Damien, his trademark snake, and throwing it on Andre the Giant, thrusting it on his chest. And here's a 7'4" mammoth of a man. The eighth wonder of the world is what they called Andre the Giant. Still call Andre the Giant. Crumbled to the mat in fear, feigning a heart attack at the hands of a 225-pound, skinny, not intimidating or overwhelming man named Jake Roberts. But a man nonetheless who was in control of the situation and brought a 7'4" giant to his knees. It's a pretty overwhelming memory. When you think about all the things as a wrestling fan, if you've been a wrestling fan for any amount of time, and most of our listeners have, most of you have, and you have great memories of Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon, or maybe Bret Hart and Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, whatever your chosen favorite was. But what you never forgot was the presence and impact that Jake Roberts had on a professional wrestling arena. It was amazing. It was a little scary because when that music would hit and you would hear Howard Finkel say, "From Stone Mountain, Georgia," that's all you had to hear. I mean, he could have never said his name. It could have just been "From Stone Mountain, Georgia," and then boom, you know it's on. Because that was what Jake Roberts was about. I mean, he was calculating, he was cold, he was methodical, he was quiet. He would get angry, and you would see that in his actions in the ring. You would see his performance, but when he spoke, it was very direct, calculating, and you paid attention because he wasn't like anybody else. He didn't scream, he didn't shout, he never had to. But with his speech, with his commentary, his promos, he forced you, he drew you in, and you were not going to leave that screen until you saw what he did, whether it was a DDT, a short arm clothesline, a knee lift that always seemed to jar just about any opponent he ever faced. Didn't matter. But you weren't leaving your television when he was in the ring. You never did. From the time he was in WWF to the time he was in WCW feuding with Sting, which, by the way, one of my favorite feuds, ended poorly with a coal miner's glove match, which was stupid, but whatever. Then in 1996, he comes back to an event that you may have heard of, King of the Ring. Had a little something to do with the birth of a guy named Jake the Snake Roberts. Nope, not Jake the Snake Roberts. I apologize. Birth of a guy named Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, the other part of that is you may not have remembered or realized that it's actually the birth of Austin 316. That seems silly, right? Nobody's going to know that. Nah, all of you know it. It's not a secret. So, fast forward, because we know from Beyond the Mat, and not the charade, but the tough time they made of Jake Roberts and showing him overweight, drunk, maybe high, and urinating in a bucket. I remember that. But that's the vision most people had of Jake the Snake Roberts. Their vision of Jake Roberts after about 96 was of an old man, past his prime maybe, who had no hope. No friends, no family. I mean, we were given a glimpse into the real world of Jake Roberts by Beyond the Mat, even though it wasn't treated necessarily as well as it could have been. Could it have been the truth? I think so. I think there's a lot of elements of truth into that. But I also think that there could have been some degree of respect put to him in the way he was portrayed. And again, this isn't sticking up for a guy who was drunk or high, but it's more recognizing the fact that Beyond the Mat was very controversial and very unfiltered, and that's what we saw with that. So anyhow, many stories would come out about Jake Roberts. Stories from showing up to independent events, drunk. I heard stories from fans that were backstage in independent shows that were alarming, sad, overwhelming. And the one thing that happened more times than not is you would hear that Jake was drunk or high, asking for crack cocaine, anything that you could think of. And it wasn't that he was at that point hopeless as far as from a fan perspective, because I think each individual wrestling fan wanted to see a redemption story. Or as Diamond Dallas Page would put it, a resurrection story. Fast forward to today, where I finally get an opportunity this evening to watch what I would consider to be one of the most powerful documentaries I've ever watched, in the resurrection of Jake the Snake. Most people know Diamond Dallas Page as the master of the diamond cutter, who could hit that move from just about anywhere, and Lord knows his popularity is legendary, and he will one day make it to the Hall of Fame. I'm confident in this. But what a lot of people didn't realize is that while Jake the Snake Roberts was his friend and influence, strongly his influence, the one thing that Diamond Dallas Page learned from Jake the Snake may not have actually been a wrestling promo, but was more or less a fire to move ahead. And Diamond Dallas Page did that not with what you would think. Not with the World Heavyweight Championship reign that rivaled Ric Flair. Not necessarily with success on a global scale like Hogan or Austin, although you got to admit, Diamond Dallas Page has made his money and then some, and you also have to give him credit for being innovative when no one else was. Well, I guess to be fair, in the Attitude Era, in that time frame for the Monday Night War, you could safely say that he was one of many innovators. But what actually we've seen with a guy like Diamond Dallas Page is the birth of a new fitness program that some people kind of shrugged their shoulders at and said, I don't know, don't get it. But a guy who was willing to go out there on a limb with no real desire to gain anything. I mean, he clearly wasn't looking for profit. Well, I mean, nobody goes into business to not make money, but the truth of the matter was, when DDP reaches out to Jake Roberts, it's one of those things that you see and you thank God for, because he reached out of love. And what this documentary, what this movie shows you, is how Diamond Dallas Page took his friend, his mentor, his brother, from the brink of extinction and brought him back from the edge and said, you're not by yourself, you're loved, you're valued, and you have so much more to do. And that fire that Jake Roberts taught to Diamond Dallas Page was transferred back to Jake Roberts through DDP Yoga, and just an incredible amount of love from not just wrestling fans, because I don't think it's ever been a secret that wrestling fans love and adore Jake Roberts and Diamond Dallas Page, but also introduced him to the love of a family. And I'm impressed at the drive that it took from all parties involved to help Jake Roberts face a demon that many people never beat. Alcoholism, drug addiction in general, is a crazy monster of an addiction. And it can, if you're not careful, and that's what it usually does, is it can kill you. But it doesn't just kill you. I mean, it kills your friends and family, whether it's emotionally or physically from mistakes like driving drunk. So when you see a guy like Jake Roberts, who is a hero to many, where you see Jake, who is a figurehead of the 80s, of professional wrestling at what many call its finest. You start to realize that this is a pretty powerful story, and watching Jake Roberts fall down and get up to his knees and get back up and go fight again. Sit down and start talking about how frustrated he is because he just wants it so bad. And then seeing him reconnect with his kids and his grandkids. No, I didn't suffer from any allergies. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was outright crying at multiple points of this movie from the real struggle and victory that comes from this movie called The Resurrection of Jake Roberts, of Jake the Snake. Jake the Snake Roberts goes through, in this movie, it chronicles his therapy, basically, through exercise, through yoga, through eating right, and through finally acknowledging some of the deeper demons rather than just addiction, but facing without fear. No, not without fear, but with acknowledgement of fear, but proceeding anyway. So I would call that bravery. Acknowledging the fact that his relationship with his father was broken. Acknowledging the fact that the mistakes he had made along the way, whether it was alcohol and drug abuse, not being there for his children or his wife, giving up on his friends, maybe making bad friends. But you see this movie and it sucks you in almost immediately. And if you're a wrestling fan, I don't know how any wrestling fan, as far as required viewing, if you haven't watched it, you need to get to Netflix and you need to pick this up and watch it. And if you have to watch it by yourself just to let it sink in, then do it. And if you want to do a viewing party, then by God, do that too. Because what you see is you see three guys in Diamond Dallas Page, Scott Hall, and Jake Roberts who refuse to lose. They refuse to give up on each other. Jake Roberts, for all of the struggles he goes through all of the pain that he endures, refuses to give up. For watching Scott Hall, for going from wanting to die to acknowledging that he was ready and that he was drinking himself as hard as he could to try to die because he wanted nothing else. He had nothing else. Then you see a guy like Diamond Dallas Page reach his hand out, and guys, this isn't a fluff piece. I mean, you see very real in this film. You see very real emotion and real. Oh God, how do you word this? It's reality. It's completely unfiltered. You see it as it happens, the way it happened. You don't see crazy edit and jump cuts and sound bites, and no, you see it. I mean, the TMZ footage, for example, of Jake Roberts, where he's at this indie show, and I can't believe that. I can't believe the things that he did, you know. But it happened. I mean, Jake Roberts came out to the ring drunk. This was in 2008, and he wasn't in any shape to perform. Wrestlers in the back knew it. Tried to explain to the promoter it was a bad idea. They do it anyway. And it gets to finally a realization. It gets to a point where you don't have a choice anymore, and it's time to It's time to stop. DDP catches wind of it, makes a phone call, and in this phone call, it finally happens. Jake Roberts decides he's going to find Hope, which is amazing. And he works, and he fights, and he hurts himself, and he fights again. He falls off the wagon and gets up. It's a very real story. And even if you're not a professional wrestling fan, if you're a sports fan, if you're a fan of entertainment in any type, people need to know that hope is real and hope exists. People need it. It's worse than any other addiction. Hope is a very real, needed, desired thing. And if you don't have it, you have to fight for it. And that's what this movie teaches you. Because at the end, when you see that Jake has made it to the Hall of Fame, that Scott Hall has made it to the Hall of Fame, and there stands Diamond Dallas Page talking about his brothers at a level that is felt on every emotional part of the spectrum, that you're just taken aback by it. It's just the coolest thing ever. You got to give props to the director Stephen Yu for seeing this project through, because I'm certain in the path of this film and the making of it that they knew there were times that they were going to want to be gone and not want anything to do with it, because everything we see there really doesn't show anything that would indicate that it's really going to end well. As a matter of fact, I mean, before Jake gets to the accountability crib, as it's later dubbed, I think many fans were anticipating the unfortunate demise. And Scott Hall as well. So you see Jake fighting and battling and finally finding victory. And then you see Jake and DDP reach out to Scott Hall, and they bring it to him. They bring him hope. They bring him victory. And it changes the game. We're not talking about pro wrestling anymore. We're talking about life. It changes lives. It is amazing. Now, I'm a wrestling fan and have been and always will be. I've been a wrestling fan since I was 7. I'll be a wrestling fan until I'm dead. And I hope that friends and family, of course, my brothers, the other two of the Triple Threat, they know that wrestling is to us what maybe the NFL or the NBA is to you, maybe 24 or whatever your favorite television show is. Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, The Preacher, which, by the way, is a phenomenal show. Whatever the case may be, everybody fights for hope. It needs an escape. It needs to feel that something matters. And this movie gives you that. This documentary, this very telling story of what it means to fight and win. And one of the best parts of it, one of the things I loved the most, was that they didn't leave the icky parts, the sticky, hard to move past parts. Like where Jake's at the airport without his shoes on. I still want to know why he wasn't wearing his shoes, but that's just because I'm curious. Drunk, apparently. And DDP pulls him back from the brink again. Tells him, no, you're not going back. You're coming back to where we live, and you're going to fight this. And he continuously tells him that it's not just for now, it's for the rest of your life, and it's not a battle that ever truly ends, but it is something that if you continue to do it, you'll see results. It chronicles Jake's return to Monday Night Raw. where honestly, the second time around for me watching this on television on Raw, seeing Jake come out to confront the Shield, I remember it and it was so cool, but the emotion of it doesn't really resonate until you watch it in conjunction with this documentary, and then you watch it and it's a whole nother level. I mean, it's just, maybe you're crying, maybe you're not, maybe you're happy, maybe you've got goosebumps, which God knows I did. Tears streaming down my face like a little girl, but who cares, man? It's the most powerful thing I've ever seen. Every single person that put effort and fought to help Jake rebuild and to help resurrect Jake Roberts got to celebrate in that moment. And it was awesome. Now, I mean, a lot of people have their own individual opinions, and it's not really what I'm about tonight. Again, the guys don't even really know I'm doing this. I just felt compelled. I watched this and I said to myself, if I don't document this one way or the other, if I don't put something together out of this, even if it's just for my own selfish thought, then I would regret it. You get an opportunity to sit down and watch what DDP Yoga does for these people. I mean, you see guys like Ray Lloyd, better known as Glacier, in there, not just helping, but working. You see Dustin Rhodes, you see Chris Jericho, Edge. You see all these people just going through and describing a man who they most likely looked up to, idolized at one point or another, and then finally they get to celebrate in the resurrection also, because there it's a victory for them, watching him come back. And then you finally see the payoff, in wrestling terms, where Jake and Scott Hall make it to the Hall of Fame. And then you watch the excerpts of the Hall of Fame acceptance speech for Jake Roberts. And again, I watched WrestleMania 30. I watched that entire Hall of Fame WrestleMania weekend. And it was a tearjerker at that time, at that moment. But when I watched it again with this documentary, it was a whole nother level all over again. It was awesome. I'll never forget what these types of moments mean to me, and I'll never get over it because it's just overwhelming. I've never seen or witnessed a production like that hit me in a way. And I'm grateful that I was able to witness it. But at the same time, wow, I had no idea. It just caught me off guard. Blindsided, I guess. But I knew it would be important to give it my undivided attention, pay the respect that it was needed for a documentary that, in my opinion, was just amazing. You don't get an opportunity to see this kind of a story or emotion very often. Most times it's, kind of, what's even the best way to put it? Most times it's just kind of scripted. It just feels over the top. It doesn't feel legitimate. But after a while, you start to finally realize that when you see a real story, a true story, and you see it for all that it is, good and bad, positive and negative, pain and happiness, that you're able to take something away from it and maybe apply it. Maybe you apply it to your everyday. I don't know. I mean, some of you have tried DDP yoga. Maybe some of you haven't, and you're wondering, is it even worthwhile? I myself have tried it, and I can tell you that it is. First off, if you're thinking that it's some kind of jacked up ladies yoga program, nope. It's definitely not that. It is hardcore. It hurts, but it's a good hurt. It's a good stretch, and it makes you feel pretty good when you're done. Yeah, a little exhausted, but what good workout doesn't give you a little bit of, I don't know, just that cool feeling of, man, this is awesome. So I hope with what you come away from, what you take away from a story like this is the truth, and that's that whatever it is that you're fighting against, a story like this just reminds you, man, you can win that fight. And I am eternally grateful for a guy like Diamond Dallas Page, who is willing to go the distance for his friends and his brothers, and not to turn his back, and not to give up, because God knows we all need somebody like that. I have that in Rob and Brian, if it's ever a question, but and it shouldn't be, because they know it. They'd probably give me a ration of crap for it tonight. But you watch a movie like that, gets you all misty. You can't help but be just caught up in it. And if you're not, man, I got to tell you, if you watch a show like that and you're not caught up in the all of it, man, I don't know what to tell you. It's it's gotta make you question where you're at with life if you're not watching that and seeing just the power of, I guess you could really say, the power of friends and of trust and of love. I'll never forget it. I'm going to be finding a way to purchase this DVD and keep it in my collection, because God knows it was powerful. Didn't really have a whole lot else planned. Again, it's all kind of came up out of nowhere for me. I didn't want to see a moment like this forgotten or left to the wayside. I wanted to recognize it and give it its due, give it its day. And that's what we're doing tonight. So, and of course we'll do that. We will get the complete set here. We will get Rob and Brian's thoughts on it. I'm certain they have watched or are going to watch this. And yeah, that's it. So hey, thanks again for checking it out. I hope this is a worthwhile download for you. Or maybe Eddie will throw it up in the rotation over on BeyondRingside.com. Hey, listen, coming up soon is going to be Money in the Bank. The Triple Threat and I will be broadcasting live, most likely do a simulcast again. I think that's a lot of fun. We enjoy doing the, as Eddie puts it, mystery science theater of it all, which I think is the best way to do it. If you want my honest opinion, I think that's how it should be. But you can catch up to the show, of course, at C2C Radio. Rob can be found, that's on Twitter, by the way. Rob can be found on Twitter at Rob Hefner. And he's also on Facebook at Rob Hefner as well. Brian is STRCP21. That's STRCP21 on Twitter. And he's on Facebook as well, Brian Taylor. The show can be found on Facebook at Corner to Corner Show on Facebook, Corner to Corner on Instagram, C2C Radio Show on Twitter. And, Corner to Corner Wrestling.com, of course, is our home and headquarters. We're happy to be on Beyond Ringside Live every Sunday night, and we love it. And, of course, ProWrestlingRadio.net. And, hey, thanks again for clicking the old listen button. Share this with your friends if you like. Download it. Let somebody hear it. Maybe it gives somebody that good feeling. And don't forget to check out the resurrection of Jake the Snake. Everybody needs a resurrection story, a redemption story. I believe this in my heart. And I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to watch it. And Lord knows I'm grateful for guys like DDP that's continuing to pull his friends back in and to keep this business whole. And if he doesn't get into the Hall of Fame based off of these types of efforts, I don't know, man. Maybe he never gets in. That's a different discussion for a different night. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Take care.